Welcome to the electron transport chain. This is the third and final step of cellular respiration, and today we're going to see how lots and lots of energy is released. But first, let's look at the big picture. The electron transport chain is part of cellular respiration, and the whole goal of this process is to take sugar, to take glucose, and to break it apart with the help of oxygen to get some energy in the form of ATP. An overview of cellular respiration shows us that there are three main steps: glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, and the electron transport chain. We know that we start this whole thing with glucose, which is a 6-carbon sugar. And during glycolysis, that glucose is split in half into two 3-carbon pyruvates. We also know that some energy is made along the way in the form of ATP. And then we go to the Krebs cycle, we get two more ATP out of it, we get some carbon dioxide out of it, and we finally go to today's lesson, the electron transport chain, where we make a whopping 32 to 34 ATP. And I just want to call your attention to one thing, is that electron transport chain seems to be the best one, but it only works because of the other two processes. This dotted line from glycolysis shows you that stuff from glycolysis is going into the electron transport chain. And this dotted line here shows you that stuff from the Krebs cycle is going into the electron transport chain. So what is that stuff? Well, you already know the answer to that. When we looked at glycolysis, we saw that, it started with glucose, and we finished with pyruvate, but other things were made, the 2 ATP. And the other stuff, which is this NADH, we made 2 NADH, these high-energy electron carrier molecules. And that is the stuff that's going to go to the electron transport chain. When we looked at acetyl-CoA formation in the Krebs cycle, because remember, this is not all the Krebs cycle. The first part is called pyruvate oxidation or acetyl-CoA formation. But together, this process and the Krebs cycle here forms not only carbon dioxide, 2 ATP, but these high energy carriers. We have 8 NADH and we have 2 FADH2, and these two are going to go to the electron transport chain along with the 2 NADH from glycolysis. So that brings us to the electron transport chain. This step has the biggest energy payoff. As we mentioned earlier, 32 to 34 ATP are going to be formed, and it occurs in the mitochondria, specifically in the inner membrane of the mitochondria, because the mitochondria has two membranes. It's got two skins, an outer and an inner, and the inner is where the electron transport chain occurs. If you remember from last time, the Krebs cycle took place here in the mitochondrial matrix, the middle of the mitochondria. And glycolysis didn't take place in here at all. If you remember, it took place out here in the cytoplasm. As mentioned, the NADH and the FADH2 we made earlier in glycolysis, acetyl-CoA formation, and the Krebs cycle, that is going to be used here in the electron transport chain. So now we're going to look at the steps of the electron transport chain. And what happens first is that NADH and that FADH2 from glycolysis, from the Krebs cycle, is going to carry those electrons that they're carrying and the hydrogen ions that they are carrying as well, and they're going to bring them to the inner membrane of the mitochondria. So here we have NADH and we have FADH2, and they are carrying these electrons right here and the hydrogen ions right here. So we're going to do something with all these extra electrons because they have all this energy that's super, super useful. And in step 2, we see that the electrons are going to be going through an electron transport chain, and as they are going through there, the energy that's lost is going to be used to do work. What kind of work? We're going to use this energy to take these hydrogen ions and pump them. And we're going to pump them here into this intermembrane space. So this is the inner membrane of the mitochondria. This is the outer membrane. And we're going to pump the hydrogens in here in between the two layers. All right, so you can see these hydrogen ions being pumped actively, and now they're building up inside of this intermembrane space. We're creating a concentration gradient like you saw when we learned about photosynthesis. In step 3, we see that this hydrogen ion concentration gradient is super helpful because now these hydrogens want to get out. They're looking for a way out. They're at a very high concentration in the intermembrane space, and they're going to escape. And where are they going to escape through? They're going to escape through this enzyme, and this is an enzyme you've seen before. This is ATP synthase. And the hydrogen ions will move through the ATP synthase. And that ion flow is going to give us the energy we need so that we can phosphorylate ADP, so we can add a phosphate group to the ADP and form ATP. So we're going to make a bunch of ATP through this process, which is what we've been after all along. In step 4, what we see happen is that oxygen is going to combine with these electrons that lost their energy. It's going to accept those electrons, and it's also going to combine with some hydrogen ions, and that is going to form water. So oxygen is our final electron acceptor at the end of the electron transport chain, and it's going to form that product that's part of cellular respiration. If you remember, the cellular respiration equation finishes with water. This is where that water is formed. So the summary of all this, right? We had 2 NADH from glycolysis. We had 8 NADH from both acetyl-CoA formation and the Krebs cycle. And we had 2 FADH2 from the Krebs cycle. We took these red things and we took them to the electron transport chain. And in the electron transport chain, we were able to make another 32 to 34 ATP, which is awesome because that's a lot of ATP. So the total ATP produced through cellular respiration is about 36 ATP, although it varies. It's really 36 to 38 ATP. It depends on which cells we're discussing because muscle and brain cells make 38 ATP. So it's 36 to 38 ATP. So this doesn't seem so efficient because it's about 40% efficient, but as far as these processes go, 40% is actually quite good. So cellular respiration is pretty efficient. It's actually more efficient than most car engines. Most car engines are actually about 20% efficient. The really, really good ones are about 40% efficient. So cellular respiration is not bad. So what happens to the other energy? Because 40% is used to make ATP. What about the other 60%? It's lost as heat. And that 60% heat loss is what helps to keep your body warm and give you that high body temperature that you have inside of your body. So that's done through cellular respiration. So to finish off, I want to show you one of the most efficient engines that there are, the dynamic force engine. And this is made, I'm going to make it a little quieter, this is made by Toyota, and they're super proud of it, and they made this video about it, how awesome it is. It's about 40% efficient. Their hybrid version is 41%. So just take a look at their engine, and let's compare that to our engine, the cellular respiration that takes place in our bodies. All right, so there it is. This is the dynamic force engine, and you might be impressed, but remember, we have something as well that does this for us in a cleaner, sleeker, better way, and that's our mitochondria, which help us perform cellular respiration. So we have something in our bodies that science and technology is having a very, very hard time beating or competing with because we haven't produced engines that are way more efficient than what we already have inside of our bodies. So I hope that was a helpful introduction to the electron transport chain. Thank you so much for watching.